Have you ever wondered why African Americans don't eat pumpkin pie? Or have you ever heard the story about the black Charlie Bucket? Well, today we're going to talk about those two stories, and if you'd like to submit your own questions, you can do so at onemikehistory.com in the contact page. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so on my Buy Me Coffee on my Patreon page in the description below. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and if you like stories like this, you can hear more stories like this at onemikehistory.com. But without further ado, let's get started. Every year, American enjoys the traditional feast known as Thanksgiving, and during this time, pumpkin and sweet potato pies sales spike. But did you know the history behind these beloved desserts and their connection to Northern abolitionists, Thanksgiving, and the holiday season as a whole? See, Thanksgiving pumpkin pie was once the hotly contested battleground in America's cultural war. In the 1800s, pumpkins and sweet potatoes became a totem in the fight to abolish slavery in America. The introduction of sweet potatoes to Western Africa in the 16th century was a very slow process. Initially, root vegetables such as cassava and yams were preferred over sweet potatoes. However, after the transatlantic slave trade, which helped spread the popularity of sweet potatoes in Europe and the Americas, it was only then that the African American community started using sweet potatoes because of their convenience. Western Africa is a yam-based culture. While sweet potatoes are not the same thing as a tropical yam, enslaved people embraced them as a substitute in the absence of true yams. Before they had sweet potato pie, they had something called sweet potato pound, which is a corruption of the Native American word for baked bread. Enslaved people were eating roasted sweet potatoes cooked in the embers of fire and started spicing and mashing up sweet potatoes. As they got access to cooking technology and equipment like ovens, they started adding pie fillings, and the sweet potato pie was born. After slavery was abolished, African Americans began to migrate away from the southern United States in what was referred to as the Great Migration. During this time period, many African Americans brought along one of their favorite dishes, sweet potato pie, and it was introduced to other regions of the country. During the same time period, during the early 19th century, eating pumpkins and celebrating Thanksgiving became synonymous with identity politics. Abolitionist and pumpkin enthusiast and home economics pioneer Sarah Joseph Hale was the driving force behind the pro-Thanksgiving campaign. Hale campaigned for state-level Thanksgiving celebrations and was largely successful in the early 1800s, helping spur declarations for Thanksgiving in 29 states by 1850. But as the fight over slavery intensified and the Civil War loomed, people in the southern states began to reject what they saw as Northern cultural aggressions. The state of Virginia in particular wanted no part of Thanksgiving. In a letter to Hale, Virginia Governor Henry Wise, who was strongly pro-slavery, expressed his disapproval of New England abolitionist goals by referring to the theatrical national claptrap of Thanksgiving, which he said was used to encourage ministers to preach Christianity politics. Still, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln would declare the last Thursday in November as the National Day of Thanksgiving. Lincoln hoped that this holiday would serve in some way to heal the wounds of the nation and restore it. And since then, every president has kept that tradition alive. Still, some members of the Confederacy were unhappy with the Thanksgiving celebration and perceived it as a political move. They were especially unhappy with what they saw as a New Englander attempting to dictate how they should live. So for many years after the Civil War, Southerners refused to celebrate Thanksgiving and refused to eat pumpkin pie. It was not until after Reconstruction that Southern states began to accept Thanksgiving, and it wasn't until 1941 that Thanksgiving holiday was officially recognized into federal law. So, in the absence of pumpkin pie, Southerners started cooking sweet potato pie made by formerly enslaved people. Pumpkin pie, despite its popularity, remained a Yankee food for many generations. It didn't gain widespread recognition across the South until the 20th century when television and supermarkets began to promote mass-market pumpkin pie fillings. Next up, we're going to talk about the story about how Charlie from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was originally a little black child. On the surface, it would seem that the story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was about good and bad children in the same vein of maybe Santa Claus, with the likable Charlie Bucket winning it all at the end. It's a classic rags to riches story that is as American as apple pie, but the story takes on a different tone when you realize the original Charlie was black. In an interview with BBC Radio in 2017, Lindsay Dahl said that the first Charlie that he wrote was a little black boy, and when asked why it was changed, she replied that I don't know, but it's a great pity. But Rondo Dahl's biographer, Donald Sturlock, during another interview stated that the change to a white character was driven by Dahl's agent, who thought that a black Charlie would not appeal to readers. He would state that, I can't tell you that the agent thought it was a bad idea, but when the book was first published, with a black hero, she asked Rondo Dahl why. Now, Rondo Dahl was not a saint. He was a self-admitted bigot, especially against Jewish people. In his first publication of the book, the Oompa Loompas were described as pygmies from Africa. He would describe them himself as hardworking but mischievous African pygmies. When the film adaptation was announced, it drew the attention of the NAACP, who expressed concerns about the transportation of Oompa Loompas from Africa to Wonka's factory would look a lot like slavery. Rondo Dahl seemed to sympathize with the NAACP's concerns and published a revised version. In this edition, as well as all subsequent sequels, the Oompa Loompas were drawn as orange-tinted with green hair, and all references to Africa was deleted. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy, and this has been One Mic History. I'm going to continue with this mini-series, and if you have questions or you just want to leave your comments, like I said, you can do so at onemichistory.com in the contact page. Thank you for listening, and peace.